Радий вітати вас в нашому ефірі. Мене звати Дмитро Пустовіт. Раніше ми анонсували вам інтерв'ю з безпосереднім учасником Мюнхенської безпекової конференції. І сьогодні привідкриємо завісу, розкажемо всі таємниці. Отже, сьогоднішній наш гість – це Бен Ходжес, американський військовик, офіцер армії США у відставці, який обіймав посаду командувача США у Європі. І з вашого дозволу, від цього моменту я перейду на англійську мову. Отже, today, we are very glad to welcome Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commanding general of U.S. Army Europe. Lieutenant Ben Hodges, welcome. Can you hear me? How can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you clearly. Thank you very much for the privilege and the opportunity.
Well, actually, the privilege is mine. The privilege is ours, and it's a big honor to have you here. And maybe one day you can come to our studio to talk live. And actually, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of things, mainly about weapons and stuff and war and stuff. But today, 20th of February 2023, since the early morning, Kiev traffic has been stopped. Also, the hard security measures has been taken all around Kiev. And the very interesting thing, that rumors said that we are expecting someone big and someone important in Kiev. And now we already know that President Biden has come to Kiev with visit, but he was expected in Poland these days. So what does it mean, this visit of President Biden in Kiev these days? How do we explain it, and what do we expect from this visit?
Well, this is exactly where my president should be, in Kiev, conveying to the Ukrainian people, but also to the Kremlin, that America is committed to Ukraine, Ukrainian sovereignty, and to the values that we hold so dear. This is exactly where he should be. And of course, he will also have to convey back to the American people how important it is that Ukraine wins. I do hope that my president uses this as an opportunity to talk about Ukraine winning, not just being successful, not just for as long as it takes, but he really needs to say the words, "We want Ukraine to win." And I think that will be a powerful message.
And after that, he will get back to Poland as he planned, as long as I understand.
Perhaps, of course, his travel schedule, particularly given these circumstances, is not something that would be public. But, you know, Poland has been such an important ally for the United States for so long. And I think if he goes there, again, that would continue to convey the message of America's commitment to stability and security in Europe, and also to thank our Polish allies for the huge burden that they carry, both in terms of collective defense, but also what Poland does to help Ukraine.
Yeah, well, actually, this is a huge sign for all world and for Russia, because during President Biden's visit, as he was walking along Kiev streets, there was a siren in Kiev. There was air alert in Kiev, and he was walking like saying, "I'm not scared of you, and we have no fear." The whole world society have no fear facing towards Putin and Russia. So let's talk about weapons. That's the big question, and this is what I would love to discuss with you. And we'll start with Russia, if you don't mind. Is Russia capable of recovering its losses, in particular in equipment, to prepare another offensive as large as one the last year? And do we consider this possible offensive as something which can really happen?
This will only happen if the West loses the will to continue to support Ukraine, or if the West is naive and foolish enough to pressure Ukraine to settle for a peace negotiation in which Russia would retain Crimea. That would set the conditions for the next phase of this war 3 or 4 years from now, after the West has moved on to something else after we've lost interest, Russia and control of Crimea will have prevented Ukraine rebuilding its economy, and it will be in a position to launch another attack after it has rebuilt its capabilities. So that's why it's so important that we help Ukraine win this year. And it's entirely possible that Ukraine can win this year if the West delivers everything that we said we would do, and if we get a sense of urgency to produce more ammunition this year. If we don't do that, then we do face the possibility of a long war and Western nations, moving on to something else.
Well, anyway, we don't need this long-term war. We need to finish it as soon as possible. So, yeah, with your help and with all European and world society, I think we'll be succeed. Anyway, what are the realistic goals of Russian offensive in coming weeks or months? What they can really do? If they're capable to do something.
Yeah, what Russia is really going to do is kill thousands more of their own soldiers. The big offensive that we've been talking about, or hearing about, I should say, appears to me to be more an increase along a broad front of more poorly trained, poorly equipped, poorly led conscripts. I don't see any indicators yet of new real capabilities. I've heard that their aircraft are being taken out of storage. I would not want to ride in any Russian aircraft that has been in storage. I would have zero confidence in the airworthiness of that equipment. So that's how desperate they are. And I just, I could be wrong. Of course, I don't see all the classified information, but I don't see the indicators of a big new offensive of a big red arrow that focuses on one place. Instead, this continued broad front approach by the Russians. Thankfully, that they have not fixed their many problems with their command structure. They have not fixed their logistical problems. They have not figured out a coherent plan on how to defeat Ukraine. And so as long as they have those problems, I think that Ukraine will be able to handle the pressure of more massed, poorly trained infantry. Meanwhile, and I believe, by the way, that this will culminate by May sometime because of loss of logistics, casualties, lost will. I don't think that they can sustain it beyond May. And then I think the Ukrainian armed forces will be ready for a counterstrike towards what really matters, which is Crimea.
How do you think? Do they still believe they can occupy all Ukraine? Because in the beginning of full-scale invasion, they wanted to occupy all Ukrainian territory, and they occupied some, and then we took it back. Our armed forces fought for it and made incredible counter-offensive actions, and now we have Kherson back, all of Kharkiv region back. Do Russians believe they can occupy Ukraine?
Yeah, of course, I know that they cannot do it. I doubt many serious Russians actually believe it. That's why the Kremlin keeps changing the goals, the aim for what they're doing. To now, they just want to, take control of all the territories which they have illegally annexed, all the 4 or 5 oblasts. But I think that if they're serious, that they know that even that they cannot do that unless the West abandons Ukraine somehow, and I don't see that happening either. So that's what, in a way, is such a tragedy here, is that because of a few people, tens of thousands of people are continuing to be killed, including thousands of Russian soldiers who I suspect don't even want to be there. But this is up to the Russian people. I mean, if they're willing to tolerate or support or enable Putin and his leaders, then they're going to continue to pay a terrible price for his catastrophic decision to invade Ukraine.
Is this the best time for people of Russia to go against Putin?
You would have thought that that would have already happened by now. But I think the Kremlin has worked hard to maintain the false narrative, the fairy tale that somehow this is Russia against NATO. And also, you and your listeners will know that so many of the soldiers who are dying for Russia are not actually from Moscow or St. Petersburg. They're from out in the ethnic regions. That's who's really paying the price here. Once families and the oligarchs, their kids are in London or in Dubai on holiday or doing things like that. So once people in Moscow and St. Petersburg begin to feel this, not just economically, but when their sons are getting killed, when it's exposed that oligarchs are not feeling any of this, their children are somehow not having to pay the price, then I think you could see an increase in domestic pressure.
Speaking about the weapons specifically, what kind of weapons does Ukraine need to turn the tide on the front line again, as it did in summer? And can the Ukrainian military quick master such kind of weapons?
Well, first of all, I've never seen soldiers who learn new equipment and new technology better than Ukrainian soldiers. It's incredible to me. So I would have great confidence that whatever is provided, they will master it very quickly. Some things obviously faster than others, but nonetheless, I've been impressed with that, and we should stop underestimating how quickly Ukraine can master new technologies, new capabilities. For me, the most important capability that Ukraine needs, in my assessment, is long-range precision capability, because this is how you can make Crimea untenable. And again, Crimea is the decisive part of this war. As long as Russia occupies Crimea, Ukraine will never be safe, it'll never be secure, and it will never be able to rebuild its economy. So getting Crimea this year, liberating Crimea this year, has got to be the priority. Donbass will come later. And I think that Ukrainian General Staff, who has impressed me so much with how disciplined and intelligent and professional they are, understands this. And so they will use what's needed to hold Russian attacks in the east, but be prepared to do what's necessary to liberate Crimea this year. And so long-range precision weapons would be very helpful in isolating Crimea, making sure the Kerch Bridge is never repaired, making sure that the so-called land bridge is broken, and then hitting Sevastopol, hitting Zhenkoi, hitting Saki, all the places on Crimea where Russians have forces, so that they have to leave. That will be the key. I would also add one last thing, is that the Supreme Allied Commander, General Cavoli, said that precision can defeat mass. And of course, what he's talking about, Russian mass infantry, which is the only advantage they have, requires Russian mass artillery. Russian mass artillery requires headquarters, ammunition, and transportation. So if you have precision weapons that can hit headquarters, ammunition, and transportation, it completely neutralizes the only advantage that the Russians have. This is why I think long-range precision weapons, and there are many different types, that's the capability that I think is most needed.
Okay, speaking about long-range distance artillery and other kind of weapons, why does it take so long, European society and NATO's partners, to deliver it to Ukraine? Because, as you said, we needed to go counteroffensive, to hit Crimea's targets, and to activate our counteroffensive. So why is it such a big challenge?
Well, this is a great question, and it's very frustrating for those of us who, the many people who want to see Ukraine win. The administration in the United States, as well as in some other countries, have been very incremental in the decision process to provide capabilities. I think partly out of a exaggerated fear of Russian response, but also a failure to appreciate and understand the theater, what's going on here and what's needed. I think that the key will be when my president says we want Ukraine to win, then I think you'll see things will pick up much more quickly. But we also have a problem in the United States and in Germany and in UK and other places. We have not, for the last 20 years, manufactured the quantities of what's needed because we didn't need it. We were in Iraq, Afghanistan. It was a different kind of conflict. It was a different requirement. And so, of course, industry is not a charity. The government has to put money into business so that businesses will hire more people and order. They have a supply chain. They have to purchase the components for ammunition. We haven't done that yet, and we're still not there yet. So hopefully the president will make the decision to start that. Same thing here in Germany where I live. But look, because I love Ukraine so much, because I have so much respect for people in Ukraine, it's also Ukrainians need to think, what were we doing the last 8 years? Why? I mean, Ukraine should be covered with ammunition. Russia invaded, this month in 2014. That was 9 years ago. What did Ukraine do between then and now to produce more ammunition, to produce more weapons? So I'm critical of my own government, but I think Ukrainians need to take a look as we reflect on all of this. Keep in mind the missed opportunity by Ukraine to do more. Hopefully we can recover now, even though the war is where it is.
Fair enough, but unfortunately we don't have time to think about what we were doing all last 8 years, and unfortunately the war has happened and we need help now, so we don't have other options to talk to USA, to talk to Europe, to talk to NATO and just ask for help, because we consider and treat all world as our friends and big partners. So that's why our relationship with all the world is going in this direction, and I believe that when world will need Ukrainian help, we can give it 100%. But speaking about other weapons like tanks and infantry carriers, for instance, British tanks, which we're supposed to get 14 of them, only 4 of them will come in spring. And what can we do with such amount of tanks, just 4 tanks? And we need lots of them. As Zaluzhny said, we need about 300 tanks to make our counteroffensive good. How long we still need to wait for the tanks if we're not speaking about generally about weapons, specifically about tanks?
So again, this whole process to make the decision to provide tanks of any sort was incredibly frustrating. But as you say, we are where we are. The British tanks and the American tanks actually were the key to opening up the door for the German Leopards. The German Leopard, I think, is probably the best solution for the situation, because that's where you get the quickest. You get the most tanks, the different types of Leopards that are out there coming from different nations. I think you'll get more tank capability with a Leo than if you had 4 or 14 or 24 or 34 British Challengers or 31 American Abrams tanks or whatever it is. Of course, there's going to be long-term requirements as well. But in the near term, getting the capability for Ukrainian armed forces to have a armored force, a fist that could penetrate Russian defenses. The quickest way to get more is, of course, with the German Leopards. And you've got the maintenance, the industrial base for the Leopard is in Europe already, close by, versus UK or the United States. And I think that you have to think about what makes a tank effective. Okay, it's the soldiers inside of it, obviously, the crew. That's the most important thing, the crew. And then how is it employed? It's got to be employed as part of what we call a combined arms team. So mechanized infantry, armored engineers, self-propelled artillery that go with the tanks so that they can penetrate defenses. The wrong answer would be to just sprinkle tanks all along the line and give tanks to everybody. That would be a total waste. And I think I know that the Ukrainian General Staff understands that, and that they will be very clever on how they focus on a particular place to launch their offensive when it's time.
So, for instance, we choose a direction. For instance, it can be like south direction of Ukraine, and we make a brigade, a tank brigade, with the artillery help, make this fist and make counteroffensive, if I understood you correct.
Yeah, that's, of course, the Ukrainian General Staff has been so impressive in how they understand the operational art. And so I imagine that the staff is looking at their options. They know what they have. They know what's coming. They're looking at time to train, to practice, to set the conditions. And there will be a lot of pressure to hurry up, hurry up. So I think the General Staff has to be very disciplined. And they need the political leadership from President Zelensky on down to allow the General Staff, the professionals, to do this. They have to resist the pressure to attack everywhere, because there will be pressure. Because, of course, our civilian leadership wants to hurry up and liberate as much as possible. But we know from history, we understand that from what war requires, if you try to attack everywhere, if you dilute your force, then you will not have enough capability. So I trust the Ukrainian General Staff to know the right place to focus that main effort that will lead to the decisive effect that we all want.
Good to know that. Thanks a lot for that, for believing in General Staff of Ukraine. That's good thing to know. And speaking about something more expensive and bigger than tanks, and before we go through it and deeply about the aircrafts, how badly we need aircrafts now? How do you think?
Well, of course, Ukraine needed airplanes a year ago. That's, again, same story. We've taken so long to get to the point where now we are at least seriously considering additional aircraft. I wish that we had supported Poland's idea back a year ago to provide MiGs. But at least now it feels like there's some progress in the right direction on getting fixed-wing aircraft, whether it's F-16 or MiGs or whatever it is. In the meanwhile, I wish that the policy would allow training to already begin. Don't wait until the decision is made and then start training, but instead start training now. Get Ukrainian pilots that are already experienced, get them in the cockpit of a F-16 or a MiG or whatever, and begin to increase proficiency so that when the decision is made, then they can go to work right away. The aircraft would be so useful for not only what we call counter-air to stop, to destroy Russian aircraft. They can also help knock down missiles that are going towards innocent Ukrainian civilians. but they would be very helpful in supporting ground operations. So this fist that would have air support with it would be even more effective. And
So
then
it would be
finally,
better to have aircraft today already.
yeah, well, that's what I said. It would have been better to have them a year ago.
What about specifying aircrafts? What are the most suitable aircraft for Ukrainian task in counteroffensive?
I'm not going to do that. I think it's a mistake when everybody becomes an expert on, tanks or F-16s or MiGs or whatever. It's much more important to talk about capability, because there will be a lot of different aircraft that might be the right, that can meet the capability. So I think it would be unhelpful on my part to emphasize a particular airplane.
Okay, I got your point. Speaking about Munich Security Conference, what are the main differences between the Munich Security Conference 2022 and 2023?
Well, obviously the 2022, when I was there, it was just days before the beginning of the special military operation. Ukraine had already been at war with Russia for 8 years, but too many people still didn't think about it as war. And there were still people in disbelief that Russia would actually attack. So I think when you think about this year, and I just came back from Munich last night, of course, the intensity, the attention, the conversations was so much different. I mean, this really, people are want to see Ukraine win. Still, unfortunately, you still have 3 or 4 people making comments that I think are unhelpful. When the president of France says, yes, we want Ukraine to win, but not to crush Russia. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, that's an empty, wasted statement. Or even when my own vice president says, we will stay with Ukraine for as long as it takes. What does that mean? That's not a clear statement of policy. And so that's my main concern coming out of Munich this year, was that you still have 2 or 3 nations, the US, France, and Germany, that are not talking about, we want Ukraine to win this year, in the sense of urgency. I hope that my president today will use this opportunity to say, we want Ukraine to win, and it can win this year. That's the quickest way to stop the killing and to remove the possibility of a third world war, by winning this year. By the way, today is an American holiday, President's Day, and I love it that my president is in Ukraine meeting with your president on American President's Day.
Oh my God, congratulations. That's a good thing to know. And if we continue speaking about Munich Security Conference, will the next security conference be the peaceful one? And how it will be different from Security Conference 2023? I know it's not always nice to make predictions, but if we think about it.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's up to us, really. It's up to the United States and Germany and France and UK and a few others to decide to commit to helping Ukraine win this year. Then next February, we could be talking about the things such as war crimes, accountability, the return of thousands of Ukrainian children who have been deported, getting them back. What does a security guarantee for Ukraine look like? Because you'll have to have a security guarantee before we can have a Marshall Plan. I mean, investors will be reluctant to put money into Ukraine if they're worried that Russia will attack again. So accountability, return of deported children, security guarantee, and investment in the Marshall Plan to help rebuild Ukraine's economy. Those will hopefully be the 4 main topics next February.
Okay, that's a good one. And I saw your tweet. You said, I agree with Ambassador McFall. Our actions and preparations are already preventing the likelihood of a third world war. Use the phrase World War III as if it as a real possibility actually limits our thinking and plays into Kremlin narratives and threatened escalation.
Right.
Should we stop talking about World War III, because some people in the world still speaking about it and still like expecting it to happen?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. If you keep talking about, we don't want to have a World War III. Okay, we're not going to have a World War III. The Russians have been threatening escalation for over a year, ever since the U.S. finally provided Javelin, then Stinger, and then HIMARS, and then Patriot, and then each time we climb the step, they threaten escalation, but they don't actually do it, because I don't think they can. I think that finally maybe we are learning that if you punch a bully in the nose, they back off. And so yes, of course we have to take seriously that Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons, and yes, they clearly do not care how many innocent people die. But I think that they believe President Biden's warning of catastrophic consequences if they use a nuclear weapon. And I think the Russians know that there is no actually advantage on the ground. It won't change anything for them if they use a nuclear weapon. There are only negative outcomes for Russia if they use it. So their nuclear weapons are actually most effective when they don't use them, because we continue to deter ourselves. We worry, oh my God, they might use a nuclear weapon. There are still people today that talk about Crimea as if it's some kind of special place, and they might use a nuclear weapon. That's us with limited thinking, deterring ourselves from doing what needs to be done.
So, 21st of February, President Biden is going to turn to Putin. European Union, NATO and Ukraine meeting is going to happen, and President Putin is going to turn to his federal government. Why is this date, 21st of February? Why everything happened that day? Maybe they're going to announce something or agreed on something.
Yeah, I have no idea. The date of President Putin speaking to his government, or the Rada, I'm sorry, the date of President Putin speaking to the Duma, I think has something to do with Russian law or other circumstances. This has been delayed for a long time anyway. So I don't know that there's a coincidence. It could be, but I don't know. I mean, world leaders getting together to do things, to align all those kind of calendars, obviously that's a hard thing to do, and not something you can pull together on short notice. So I don't know. You're making a connection that I'm not qualified to make a comment on.
But still, maybe probably we'll find out something new for Ukraine, for us, maybe some new information or some news about Russian-Ukrainian war. Bad or good, anyway.
I hope so. I mean, if the president came all the way to Kiev, it's probably more than just a courtesy call. I mean, but of course, that's the kind of thing that would not be made public until they're ready for it to be made public.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your time, and it was a big pleasure and honor to talk to you.
Okay. Sorry I'm not more helpful on that.
No. That's good. Thanks a lot. My bad.
Okay.
If you punch a bully in the nose, he'll back up. That's a good phrase. We need to remember that. And I'm really glad that finally the whole world understood who is the bully and who need help and who need help badly. So I deeply respect what you done and what your country done for Ukraine and for our victory. And I also really grateful for your time and for talking to us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Hodges, that was the very interesting conversation. I'd really love you to come to Kiev one day to meet you in person. Thanks a lot.
I would love that. Thank you for the privilege and the opportunity.